Welcome to Blind Trust. Somewhere near you right now, there is a drawer. And in that drawer, under the chargers and the old cables, there is probably a phone with a tiny keyboard on it. Little plastic keys you could type on without looking. For about a decade, that phone was the most powerful object in business. Presidents carried it. Wall Street ran on it, and the company that made it had just done something that should have saved them. They had walked into a room, taken apart their rival's brand new phone, looked at the circuit board, and reached a verdict from the smartest engineers in the industry. The verdict was that it could not work. The battery would die in a day. The full internet would choke the cellular network. It was, they decided, a beautiful, impossible toy. So the market leader, the company that had basically invented the smartphone, looked directly at the future and chose to do nothing. 7 years later, they were worth almost nothing. This is the story of how the people who understood phones better than anyone on Earth managed to be completely, catastrophically right. To understand how a company can be right and still lose everything, you have to go back to a small Canadian city called Waterloo, Ontario. Not Silicon Valley, not California. A quiet university town a couple of hours from Toronto. In 1984, a college dropout named Mike Lazaridis, 23 years old, started a company there with a childhood friend, Doug Fregin. They called it Research in Motion. RIM, their first real contract, was not a phone at all. It was a job building electronic display signs for General Motors, about $600,000. That was the company that would one day make the device on the president's desk. For years, they were small. Engineers solving engineering problems. Then, in 1992, a second man arrived who would change everything. Jim Balsillie, a chartered accountant with a Harvard business degree, sharp, aggressive, all elbows. He put his own money in for roughly a third of the company, and he never hid how high the stakes really were.
So that'll just be it.
We're a very poorly diversified portfolio. It's it either goes to the moon or it crashes to Earth. So, but it's making it to the moon pretty good. So.
Sure, totally.
From then on, Research in Motion ran on two heads instead of one. Lazaridis, the engineer, owned the product and the technology. Balsillie, the dealmaker, owned the business, the sales, the money. Two co-chief executives, two thrones. For 15 years, that arrangement worked almost perfectly. The day it stopped working, the company was already on fire. Now here is the part everybody skips, and it is the most important part of the whole story. You cannot understand why BlackBerry won or why it lost until you understand what was actually inside it. So picture this. It is the late 1990s. The mobile internet does not really exist. Wireless data is brutally expensive and painfully slow. Sending a single email to a phone over the air is like trying to push a couch through a mail slot. Everybody else gives up. Lazaridis does not. He builds a road. Think of it like a private toll road built for exactly one kind of traffic. First, compression. BlackBerry squeezed every email down to a fraction of its size before it ever touched the network. So it sipped data where everyone else gulped it, on a metered cellular plan. That was the difference between affordable and absurd. Second, push, not pull. Your phone did not have to keep asking the server anything for me. The mail was pushed to you the instant it arrived. It just appeared. To a person in 1999, that felt like magic. And third, the part that mattered most to the people with the money. Every BlackBerry message ran through a relay, a network operations center in Canada. Inside a company, it connected to something called a BlackBerry Enterprise server, sitting safely behind the corporate firewall. The whole thing was encrypted, and here is the crucial detail. The keys to that encryption were held by the company itself, not by Research in Motion. So if you were a bank, a law firm, a government, you were being told something irresistible. Your secrets travel on a locked private channel, and not even the company that built it can read them. That promise built a fortress, and the fortress made BlackBerry untouchable. The name on the device under the president's desk was not an accident. When Barack Obama took office in January 2009, the security agencies wanted to take his BlackBerry away. He fought to keep it, and they had to harden a special one for him. because nothing else was trusted enough. Think about what that means as an advertisement. The single most security-sensitive person on the planet would not give up his keyboard. And it was not just power, it was addiction. In 2005, BlackBerry added a messaging system, BBM. Every device had a secret 8-character code, a PIN, and if you knew someone's PIN, you could message them instantly, for free. Over data, while everyone else was still paying for every single text, you could see when your message was delivered. You could see when it was read. Teenagers got hooked. Executives got hooked. People called the thing Crackberry because they physically could not put it down. So by the end of the decade, the numbers were staggering. By December 2009, BlackBerry held almost 42% of every smartphone in the United States. At its peak, around 80 million people worldwide were carrying one. Revenue would climb to nearly $20 billion in a single year. The stock had touched $148. They had never been bigger. They were also, by then, already quietly finished. They just had no way of knowing it. Because the thing that would kill them had been sitting on a stage 2.5 years earlier, and they had laughed at it. January 9th, 2007, San Francisco. A man in a black turtleneck and jeans walks onto a stage and says 9 words.
Today, Apple is going to reinvent the phone. And here it is.
No keyboard, no buttons. Just a sheet of glass and a screen that filled the entire front of the device. Steve Jobs held up the first iPhone, and the entire shape of the future shifted under everyone's feet. In the audience and around the industry, engineers stared at it. And at Research in Motion, they did exactly what good engineers do. They got one, and they took it apart. And what Mike Lazaridis saw genuinely alarmed him. Not the screen, the guts. He looked at the components and said, "They've put a Mac in this thing. A full computer, not a phone with email, an actual computer that happened to make calls." And then he said the sentence that becomes the center of this entire story. He looked at the way that little computer pulled the full, open internet down over the cellular network. And he said, it is going to collapse the network. And then he asked the question that tells you everything about how he saw the world. How did they get AT&T to allow that? Sit with that question, because Lazaridis was not being stupid. He was being an expert. By every rule he knew, he was right. The iPhone was a power-hungry, data-hungry machine, and the carrier networks of 2007 genuinely could not handle millions of them at once. He had spent 20 years learning the laws of this universe. He just did not realize that one of those laws was about to be repealed. So let's go back to the toll road, because this is where everything turns. Remember what Research in Motion built. The most efficient possible road for one specific kind of traffic, email, squeezed small, sipping data, running through their own relay in Canada. And to get cars onto that road, they did deals with the toll partners, the carriers. We will keep your network light, we will keep your data cheap, and in return you sell our devices. For years, that was a beautiful arrangement. Everybody made money, the road was full. Now watch what Apple actually did, because it was not what Lazaridis thought. Lazaridis assumed Apple was trying to drive a heavier, hungrier car down his toll road, and of course it would break. But Apple did not get on the road at all. Apple built a car that drove the open public highway, the full internet, and then it walked into the toll operator's office and convinced them to lift the gate. The thing Lazaridis treated as a law of physics, the carrier will never allow this much data, was never physics. It was a business deal, and Apple simply made a different deal. That is the whole pivot of the case. So let me say it plainly. The carrier's permission was a constraint that could be renegotiated. Lazaridis mistook a rule that humans had written for a rule the universe had written. He was the world's leading expert on a map that Apple was about to redraw. And the moment that gate lifted, the phone stopped being an email device on the carrier's terms and became the open internet in your hand. And here is the cruel twist, the heart of the whole story. Every single advantage that made BlackBerry unbeatable now became the thing holding it back. The moat was the trap. Take it piece by piece. The compression, that gorgeous data sipping efficiency, was built for a world of scarce, expensive bandwidth. The iPhone arrived just as bandwidth got cheap and abundant. The thing they had optimized for stopped being the problem. Their masterpiece was a solution to a question nobody was asking anymore. The relay through Canada, the locked enterprise server, the keys held by the company, all of it was designed for a world where the buyer was the corporate department. And departments love control. They love locked, managed, secure, but the iPhone changed who the buyer was. Suddenly, the person choosing the phone was not the IT director. It was the employee, the actual human being who wanted apps, and a real browser, and a screen that did more than email. People started buying their own iPhones and walking into work and saying, "I want my email on this," and one by one. The IT departments gave in, the fortress was sold to the gatekeeper, it was killed by the customer, and then the value itself migrated. On July 10th, 2008, Apple opened the App Store. In 3 days, 10 million downloads. Inside a year, 1 billion, a whole universe of software that Research in Motion did not build and did not control. Even BBM. The messaging lock-in that had hooked a generation started leaking away to apps Apple and Google made instead. So the company that had spent 20 years building the perfect road woke up to discover that the world had moved off the road entirely and taken the value with it. They had been right about the network. It did not matter at all. Now, Research in Motion was not asleep. They fought. The problem is that every answer they reached for came from inside the old map. Their first response to the iPhone was a phone called the Storm in 2008, a touchscreen BlackBerry, but they could not bear to fully let go of the keyboard they loved, so they built a screen that physically clicked when you pressed it, like a giant button. Trying to simulate the feel of typing, it was clever. It was also widely seen as a frustrating, half-committed compromise. They were trying to answer a new question with the muscle memory of the old one. Then came the big swing. The Playbook, a tablet, launched in April 2011 to answer the iPad. It ran on Sirius, genuinely impressive software called QNX, and it shipped with a flaw so strange it is almost hard to believe. The BlackBerry tablet, made by the company that built its entire empire on email, could not do email on its own. Out of the box, no native mail, no calendar, no contacts, unless you tethered it to a BlackBerry phone. The email company shipped an email device that could not email. Customers stayed away. By Black Friday, they were slashing the price from $499 to $199, and in December 2011, the bill came due. Research in Motion wrote down the Playbook by roughly $485 million. Inventory that nobody wanted, marked down to almost nothing. Meanwhile, the phone that was actually supposed to save them, a new operating system called BlackBerry 10, kept slipping. Late 2012, then early 2013, every delay was another quarter the world spent buying iPhones and Androids instead. The company was bleeding out slowly in public, and the two men at the top, the engineer and the dealmaker, were about to learn that the board had run out of patience. January 22nd, 2012. After 15 years, the two-throne arrangement ended. That morning, the news went out.
There's a big shakeup in the world of high tech. The two CEOs of the company that makes BlackBerry announced they both resigned. Jim Balsillie and Mike Lazaridis founded Research in Motion. COO Thorsten Heinz is taking their place. RIM.
The founder and the dealmaker, out in the careful language of the press release, Lazaridis said there comes a time in the growth of every successful company when the founders recognize the need to pass the baton. It is the politest possible way to describe being walked to the door of the company you built from nothing in a Canadian college town. And Thorsten Heinz's first message to the world told you everything about how deep the denial still ran. On his first day, asked what needed to change, Heinz said, "I don't think there is some drastic change needed." The company had gone from 42% of the American market towards single digits, was writing down hundreds of millions of dollars, and the new captain stood up and said the ship did not need to turn. The market heard it. The stock fell again the next day. For a year, everything rode on one product, BlackBerry 10. The all-new operating system, the clean break, the phone that would prove the company still had a future. And on January 30th, 2013, it finally arrived. They were so committed that they renamed the entire company that day. Research in Motion was gone. From now on, the company itself was simply called BlackBerry. The first phone was the Z10, an all-touch device with no keyboard at all. After all those years, the keyboard company had finally built the iPhone's answer. The reviews were respectful, and it did not matter, because the world had already moved on years before. There was no reason left for an ordinary person to switch back. The apps were on the other side. The friends were on the other side. The habits were on the other side. And the numbers were brutal. There were reports that the Z10 was coming back from stores faster than it was selling, returns exceeding sales. Let that sit for a second. People were not just declining to buy the rescue phone, they were buying it and then bringing it back. By the autumn of 2013, BlackBerry took a write-down on that phone of roughly $934 million. And posted a loss for the quarter of nearly $1 billion. By the autumn of 2013, BlackBerry was no longer fighting to win, it was fighting to exist. In September, a group led by a Canadian firm called Fairfax Financial signed a letter of intent to take the whole company private. $9 a share, about $4.7 billion for a company that had once touched a stock price of $148. And then even that fell apart. The buyout collapsed. Instead of a sale, BlackBerry took a $1 billion emergency investment, pushed out Thorsten Heinz, and brought in a turnaround specialist named John Chen to try to keep the lights on. Chen did something quietly radical. He stopped trying to win the war that was already lost. And on September 28, 2016, BlackBerry made it official. It announced it would end all internal hardware development. The company that had defined the smartphone would no longer make phones at all. From then on, if you saw a phone with a BlackBerry name on it, somebody else had built it under license. The keyboard, the device in the drawer, the thing presidents had carried, was over. As Chen put it, BlackBerry is no longer just about the smartphone, but the smart in the phone. And here is the part of the story almost nobody tells, because it does not look like the story you came for. BlackBerry did not actually die. It just stopped being visible to you. Remember that genuinely excellent operating system underneath the failed playbook, the one called QNX. It turned out QNX was extraordinary at exactly one thing, running critical systems that must never ever crash. And there is a place that needs software that never crashes, that runs on a private network that is locked down and secure. Not your pocket, your car. So while the world wrote BlackBerry's obituary, the company quietly slid its software into the dashboards and the safety systems of the auto industry. The executive who engineered that second act, John Chen, was blunt about what the company now was.
So the company was for mobility, so we maintained that DNA. So mobility, security, if that's important to you, then we are the only choice. But if that's not, then, then you could pick any one of those other people.
By 2018, QNX was running in about 120 million vehicles. By 2022, more than 215 million. There is a real chance that the company you think of as a dead phone brand is sitting silently inside the car in your driveway. Right now, the instincts that lost them the phone war, security control, reliability over a managed network, turned out to be exactly right for a different market entirely. They were not wrong about what they were good at. They were just wrong about where it mattered. So what do we actually take from this? The easy version of the BlackBerry story is that they were dinosaurs who missed the future. But that is not what happened, and I think the truth is far more unsettling. They did not miss the future. They saw it clearly, took it apart on a table, and measured it correctly. The battery really was weak. The networks of 2007 really could not have handled it. By the rules of their world, the iPhone could not work. Their fatal mistake was not blindness, it was certainty. They were so expert in the existing rules that they could not imagine the rules themselves being rewritten, and that is the trap that has nothing to do with phones. The thing that makes you the best in the world at the current game is the exact thing that blinds you when somebody changes the game. The moat you spent decades digging is the wall you cannot see over. BlackBerry mistook a business deal for a law of physics, and it cost them everything. So here is the question I would leave you with. Look at the technology you rely on today. The things everyone agrees are simply how it works. The permanent, settled rules, somewhere in there. Right now, someone is treating a business decision as if it were a law of nature. The only real question is who and when. So, what would you be willing to bet is actually permanent?